Okay, Miranda, where'd it go?
My photographer came here an hour before on his own to check the place out. State law requires county shelters to meet a list of minimum standards. Some things we recorded here were below minimum standard. Standing water, water bowls turned over, unsanitary holding areas, torn makeshift roofs over dozens of puppies, and an apparent problem with drainage.
Hey, how are you? Miranda Combs, WKYT. We're doing a story on
This is the supervisor of the Kentucky River Regional Shelter. He didn't want to talk about what we saw at the shelter.
Do you need help? Is it a funding issue? Is it just too many animals?
I ain't got no comment.
We stuck around and he got his chairman of the board, Tammy Noble, on the phone.
And we've been working on a story trying to figure out what shelters in the state aren't up to their minimum standards by Kentucky legislation from '04. It was supposed to start in '07.
So at this point in time, nobody knows how many of the counties are in compliance with the 2004 laws.
Cynthia Gaskill has started a study through the University of Kentucky to find out how many counties are in compliance with the 2004 Kentucky legislation that placed minimum standard requirements on county shelters. It also moved oversight and control of the law from the Department of Agriculture to the counties.
No one at the state level has the power to enforce the laws, and it created a situation of self-regulation by the counties.
Very quickly found out it was not going to be as easy and as straightforward as I thought it would be.
Jennifer Sinsky released this report through the University of Louisville on the current state of Kentucky shelters. Since the minimum standards law was put in place, no one has checked to see how it's working.
And they're not utilizing it.
She found out not well. She filed open records requests with each county for animal records, which each shelter is required to keep as part of the 2004 legislation. Sinsky's intent was to start a database to share information and in turn improve shelter transparency. Only 66 of the 120 counties completed her request.
There's no way to check up on any shelter to see if they are following this law.
She says it's mostly because there's no enforcement from the counties where the shelters sit.
The only enforcement right now is that if you live in that county and you decide to follow this up, you can potentially sue your county for not meeting the requirements. That's it. That's your only recourse.
These are outside year-round.
And that's not good.
You're required to have heat.
Attorney Catherine Callahan has picture
Urine on the floor.
after picture
I don't know if that animal can stand a full height.
Which is
Required by law.
of below standard shelters across the state.
In your opinion, is there any excuse for any of this?
For the ones that I've shown you, no. Some of the counties didn't even know there was still money available.
This shelter is run by a nonprofit and sits in Perry County. Perry, Letcher, Knott, and Breathitt counties all pay to bring their animals to this shelter.
And I don't think that anybody would work in this situation and not be 100% an animal lover. So I'm not blaming anyone here. I'm wondering if the county needs to support this more.
Noble tells me they're doing the best they can with what they have. The counties pay the shelter $22,000 each a year for the shelter services. That's less than $90,000 a year total. Is it enough? The one that decides is the one writing the checks. My photographer took this video at the Kentucky River Regional Animal Shelter about a month ago. What he discovered was standing water, water bowls turned over, unsanitary holding areas, torn roofs, and backed up drains lining the cages.
This is Haas. We had Haas's brother here last year.
A week after our story aired, Chairman Tammy Noble invited us back to talk.
I wouldn't expect a shelter to smell good, but it stinks.
Well, a lot of the reasons for that is we're not up to shelter standards.
Noble says the physical problems are fixable.
And it's not big numbers.
Something a $400,000 grant they are getting is aimed at correcting. But the reason the shelter is in this shape, Noble says, has nothing to do with the shelter itself.
This isn't your fault.
This is not our fault. This is the community's fault.
This became the disposal center for the community.
Dr. William Hagens spends his lunch break from his veterinary clinic here at the shelter.
Usually I just do a visual physical exam.
He examines every animal every day for free.
If they need medicine or whatever, then he prescribes the medicine and then we give the medicine to them.
I felt obligated to help.
When he started in 2011, he says 98% of the animals that came through the door were euthanized immediately.
Yeah, it was clean, yeah. It's easy to keep something clean if it's empty, you know, and that's the way that I look at it.
After 2011, the empty stalls started filling up.
So you've got 3 dogs.
3 dogs per kennel, yeah.
Noble and her board changed the population, and in the past 4 years, they've gotten the euthanization rate down to 4%. They say they are doing what's right when the community isn't.
People will come in and surrender their animals and they won't even claim them as being their own. And, you know, you have an 8 or 10-year-old dog, just knowing its name means something to that dog. And we have owners that won't even admit that they're their dog.
Caesar was one of those dogs. He came into the shelter 30 pounds underweight.
He was close, I mean, very, very close to death.
And when they opened the dog crate, hey buddy, as he emerged, it was all the defenses I'd put up, just imagine how bad he could be. I mean, I could never imagine how bad he would look.
Now they call him Clyde. His owner, Joshua Waters, says a lot of food, water, and faithfulness brought him back.
But now we've gotten him where he's doing much better, and he's really happy.
Waters says there needs to be more oversight for shelters. The state minimum standards are controlled by the county.
Does this shelter need more money?
This shelter, all shelters need more money. I'll tell you that straight up front.
Letcher County Judge Executive Jim Ward says the 4 counties that feed into this shelter now pay $2,000 a month to the shelter. That's up from the $1,500 it had been for years.
With our coal service being down so much, we just don't have any extra money that we can shell out.
So between low funds and high animal intake, state minimum standards are hard to meet.
This is a small shelter, you know, for 4 counties. You know, so trying to put those regulations on a shelter this small, it's very difficult. You know, and if you do live by those standards, yes, you do have euthanasia rates of 98%.
And Clyde might not have met Joshua.
He's probably had a hard life, but it's all over now.